Now, Adidas has been accused of erasing women after an advert which featured a biological male in a biological female swimming costume appeared as part of the company's Pride 2023 collection. The move has prompted criticism from women's equality campaigners for taking away women's jobs, but also for the unrealistic body expectations. It comes after Nike received flack for a sports bra advert using trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney. Now, joining me in the studio is media personality Oli London, and he believes Adidas should not have done this advert. Meanwhile, campaigner and facilitator of Dialogue, Katie John Went, joins us and thinks this isn't so bad as an advert idea. OK, Oli, I'm going to come to you. Thank you both so much for joining me on a Saturday afternoon. Really appreciate it. Oli, I'm going to come to you first. I mean, what are your initial thoughts about this advert? What did you think when you saw it?
Well, firstly, I was shocked, but I was not surprised because we've seen now a long list of companies. We've seen Nike with the Dylan Mulvaney sports bras. We've seen Dylan Mulvaney advertising Bud Light. So we've seen this real push recently of brands pushing all of this kind of wokeness on the consumer. And it doesn't represent the majority of consumers because, you know, most women will actually be put off by this advert. They'll find it offensive. But the reason this is happening so many times with these big multi-billion-dollar companies is because of something called the Corporate Equality Index, which is a scorecard that basically goes around to these businesses. They get a perfect 100% scorecard if they push trans models at the forefront of their campaigns and about how inclusive they are. And it's kind of ironic because Bud Light did that. They've had such a backlash. They lost $6 billion worth of their stocks, and they've actually been suspended from their CEI index scorecard because they failed to defend Dylan Mulvaney. So, you know, we're seeing that consumers aren't going to stand for this. I think a lot of women are upset, and it's just mocking women at the end of the day.
Katie, as a woman, I'm not entirely sure who this advert is aimed at. It's clearly a woman's costume. It's being sold as a woman's swimming costume. So are they trying to sell it to women? Are they trying to sell it to men? I'm not entirely sure. What do you make about this advert?
Well, as Oli said, I think it is part of the current climate and what people are trying to do. Having said that, it's not that far off the kind of swimming costume a man would have worn in the 1920s. You know, the style of it is one thing and completely irrelevant in that respect. But we have to notice it is not being aimed entirely at women. It is part of their Pride collection. They're doing it just about to turn the corner into Pride Month, and they're doing it as part of that. So it is meant to be inclusive. And if you swipe on the actual ad and go to the other styles available, you see they've also used a woman as well to model the same costume in a plus size. I mean, you could argue that you could do a whole kind of dove thing with about 15 different models and size and shapes and ages and ethnicities of women to be really diverse. But it is aimed at a pride market. It is a pride kind of costume. Yeah, that said, it is an unrealistic body shape, certainly for women at 6'2" and size 6 and something like that. It's the actual model's shape is not necessarily achievable in the female range. It's a non-binary model as far as kind of I'm aware. But if they wanted to be really radical, what they could have done is they could have put that costume and that model in the men's section, or develop a unisex section and say, actually, let clothes be clothes. We're going to actually from now on say that clothes don't have necessarily a sex and gender, as many of them don't anyway, and actually be pioneers in the kind of the unisex market for clothing.
Oli, I think that's an interesting point. The fact that this is in the woman's section and it is quite clearly a biological male. I think that's the issue most of us have with it. I mean, what about what Katie says, having a unisex section and a male section and then a female section? That would keep everybody happy, maybe.
Sure. I mean, I think the way fashion is going, it is very gender neutral, and I think there's certainly a demand from consumers for that. So, you know, if there was products specifically made for trans people, non-binary people, and they had their own section, that's, you know, I think something that would make everyone happy. But when it's being pushed as a women's wear campaign, that's the real issue. And if you notice as well, all of the male models modelling the women's swimwear are very, very skinny, almost underweight. Whereas if you compare it to all of the female models, they are plus-size models. And, you know, I find that an interesting contrast that Adidas did that specifically. We also had the other day Sports Illustrated featured Kim Petras, a transgender model, on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And, you know, she's a fantastic singer. I think she's great. But I think the issue with that is the consumers buying these products, for instance, Sports Illustrated is a men's wear magazine based. Men buy it to look at pictures of women, the swimwear editions and stuff. And I think it's almost trying to subconsciously change the habits of straight heterosexual men. And try to convince them that, women are no longer desirable. The new desirable thing is, skinny, transgender models. So I think it's a subtle play at trying to alter the minds of consumers. But I agree with Katie that, maybe just make a unisex category because fashion is very gender neutral these days. People like to try new things. I think, everybody would be happy then.
Absolutely. Now, Katie, coming back to you. Now, Sharon Davis, who, as we know, is a feminist campaigner and certainly women in sport and women's rights in sport. Sharon Davis has called this advert as an assault on being female and called on Adidas to stop gaslighting women. What would you say to her about her comments?
Well, I can understand them given the kind of the nature of the dialogue, or rather the lack of dialogue that we've had the last 5 or 6 years over gender and over sex. But as with Oli, I disagree with Oli in this sense. I don't think there is a huge kind of conspiracy to kind of undermine what a woman is, to kind of gaslight women or anything like that. However, I do agree with him that a lot of it is to do with DEI point scoring on various indices. You can go back through kind of Adidas's kind of history working with, Kanye, the Muslim hiking organization they work with during Ramadan. There is a degree of kind of diversity point scoring. And if it is done badly, it backfires. If you do not know your audience, if you do not do a focus group, which consists of a balance and a range of people, things are going to backfire. And you can see that if I was a brand right now, I'd be keeping my head low and popping my head back up in a year or two when things perhaps have died down. Because right now, the whole discussion and debate around this has become toxic, and anyone putting anything out there they're going to get seen, but they're not necessarily going to get seen in a positive light. It's going to create controversy. People will start talking about the brand. Yes, and people are already saying, hey, I'm not going to buy Adidas now, but that means they're going to run out of sportswear very, very quickly because most of the brands are all doing it, and the one that doesn't do it doesn't appear on the index, as Oli said as well. But there's brands like Dr. Martens, one of my favourite kind of gender-neutral brands, who I have written to nearly every year saying, your boots are identical for men and women, and you model them in all kinds of people, you do Pride editions and everything, but why can you not just get rid of the male and female boot categories? It's the same bloody thing, pardon my French, but they have floral ones for the women and they have manly ones for the men. Why can they not disrupt what is considered masculine and feminine so that actually people can enjoy wearing clothes and letting clothes be clothes?
Actually, that's a fair point. And so go back, I love my DMs as well, Katie. And the difference is that they stop at a certain size in the women's shoes. And that's very frustrating as a woman with big feet. Oli, but I think one of the problems a lot of women have with this advert is the body image and the messaging it does send to women, certainly women in sport and young girls who are struggling with their own body image. And you are seeing this entirely unrepresentative image of long legs, long arms, size 6, but the only other option you're given is an obese person, which is unhealthy. Why can't we just have normal, whatever normal women is, and selling us women's clothing?
Well, I think that's what women want to see. Women want to see different shapes of women, different types of women from different ethnic backgrounds, modelling for brands, and we should be, pushing for that and celebrating that. But I also think we need to, stop when it gets to this wokeness, because they're doing it almost to cause offence, to kind of tick the diversity box, get that high corporate equality index score, and they're all doing it right now, but they need to listen to consumers, because Bud Light lost $6 billion. Week on week, they're losing about 23.6% of their turnover based on their sales figures from last year. So, people are really standing up now. It's not simply like, we're just going to forget about this. Brands need to listen to their consumers. And if you're marketing a swimwear costume for women, you need to listen to them. So what Katie said earlier is a great idea. Maybe get people from different backgrounds, different groups to come together and have a chat about it. Instead of just Adidas making these executive decisions, have a chat, consult women, consult trans groups, consult everyone and see, what's the best solution? How can we give everyone a opportunity to feel that they have a platform, that they are being seen and visible. So the trans people are visible, non-binary people, women are visible. How can we do this in a way that's sensitive, that's not going to offend women and not going to alienate consumers?
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Oli London, social media influencer, and thank you very much, Katie John Went, campaigner, for joining me this afternoon.